afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Multnomah County Board of Commissioners 19th Budget Work Session, number 19. Audience members, we just had a Juneteenth celebration. I like that. Audience members, I just want to start by asking you to please silence your electronic devices. For those presenting today, please turn your mic on when you begin speaking and off when you've completed your remarks. For all presenters, please state your name for the record before speaking or responding to questions. So this is really a discussion. I really appreciate the discussion we had yesterday. Appreciate the opportunities to talk through our amendments in greater detail. I again want to appreciate staff and the who have taken the time to put together an agenda that's, for us to consider talking through things today. There was a request by one of the commissioners to move fees down to the last thing that we talk about. So we will, but everybody should have a printout in front of you. There was a disclaimer at the top, if you haven't seen that, just because there were still amendments dropping yesterday. There wasn't 100% certainty that everything had been captured under these categories. So as we go through and have discussions, if you realize one of your amendments isn't reflected, just please point that out. I also want to appreciate the budget office staff for the updated Giganto spreadsheet that they have given us that should reflect all the amendments that have been put forward, including those yesterday. So thank you for that. So we can just begin by talking through each amendment or the handful of amendments that identified, and we can begin with that. And again, I want to appreciate all the department directors and staff who are here to help answer questions that might come up as we're talking through amendments or offsets and impacts or questions that happen about different programs and proposals. So with that, we can take a look at public safety. Lots and lots of amendments under the public safety category. So we've got 4, 15, 16, 18, 34, 25, 26, and 39. So I'll just open up for commissioners if we want to start having conversations about the public safety.
Just looking at the numbers. So the numbers it's the numbers not of the yesterday's spreadsheet, but they're new amendment numbers.
So Sarah, are the numbers on here the old spreadsheet numbers?
No, the new.
Okay.
You just need a mic over there.
Or Brittany.
Good afternoon, commissioners. Christian Elkin, County Budget Director. I use she, her pronouns. One thing I do want to point out is that as we're updating the spreadsheet, we are not renumbering things on purpose. So if an amendment gets withdrawn, we just withdraw that number and we don't renumber. So these should be still reflective of everything that was on the sheet yesterday and the same numbers. I mean, the number amendment numbers, maybe you all did some adjustments to actual amendments yesterday. And so the numbers reflect those, the actual general fund, SHS, those numbers reflect the updates, but the amendment numbers should not be changing.
But if we wrote on the other sheet, those numbers, they carry over.
Depends on which number you're talking about.
The thing is.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Christian, and thanks for making sure that we didn't get ourselves in trouble with the numbering. Okay, so great, we can use this as, so.
I mean, I see PSH is in here. It's kind of an odd duck for a public safety conversation, but.
I was wondering about
Me
that.
too. We're gonna phone a friend. For number 4, it's PSH.
Also largely not public safety. It's addiction prevention, legal fix.
Oh, Mike's.
Okay, Mike.
Go through the court system and we could still.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's fine. I would just propose we talk about the PSH amendment in a housing bucket, I assume we'll have later.
Guess it could
Yeah.
work better.
Was that,
Yeah,
Or we could just do it
Okay.
now, but just call it housing.
well, why don't we?
Well, if we're going to talk about, I mean, this is a really easy amendment. I think we should fund PSH with ongoing funding over the ongoing that is in shelter for shelters that are closing during the fiscal year. So this is the first part of that amendment to move money into PSH for about 200 units for families, youth, and single adults or couples.
So is this just a swap?
This is a fund swap. It's moving ongoing SHS into PSH out of shelter. And then there's a different amendment for moving one-time only dollars into just the dollar amounts for these two shelters that are slated where leases end. So one is a lease that ends that we cannot renew or extend. And the other is a building that I think I've said a couple of times DCJ has been asking for since I was at the county. So at least 4 or 5 years now. That I think is slated to go back to them at Y East.
And so the paired amendment for that is number 5?
Correct.
Okay. I know there were conversations about the SARP program in DCJ. Was there any further information that we needed to talk about around that?
I would like to find another trade-off. But I'm fine with moving SHS out of it, but I want to find a backfill. We thought we had one, but unfortunately, in order to absorb the reduction in anticipated state funds, this creates, it's already, yeah. So I just don't think there's anything left in DCJ that could like quite literally be cut.
And I will say, I don't know that the dollar to backfill comes from DCJ, but I'm curious, Director, what is the minimum dollar amount that would be needed to sustain SARP in some way? And part of this comes from my question of a pretty significant reduction, but then the department's still saying predicting the same amount of outcomes. And so I don't know if needs to be sustained at the same level. And I know that's a hard question because you're a department director and your job is to fight for your programs. But I'd be interested to know if there's like this is the minimum amount we need for this program to function.
Good afternoon, Denise Pena. I'm the director for DCJ. Use she, her pronouns. Actually, that's not that difficult of a question to ask, Commissioner Singleton. So for us, it is going to be the amount of the $993,663. That is after the reduction that we received from SHS for this program. And that really is a total of 5 FTE, and that is the basic minimum staffing level required to run the program. And so before, when we had it at that higher dollar amount, I think I spoke up a little bit about this during our presentation. Last year, when we received SHS funding, it was to really expand SARP for capacity, and to do that came staffing. But with the amount of vacancies that DCJ has been experiencing, we were not able to get those staff actually on board. And so the numbers that we have been providing has been to those 5 positions that we've been operating with ever since we began the program several years ago.
And the current SHS allocation is one time only. So what would be the thinking around, so essentially SARP would be open, but you would be planning to close it down during next fiscal year based on the first funding source?
Correct. And given our forecast for 1145, I am not feeling very optimistic that we would be able to find the money internally. We were not able to find the money internally in this budget to help with the reduction.
Thank you.
A question I have, and this is a combination of Health Department and DCHS. I had asked the question about, could SARP qualify as day services to individuals who are Medicaid eligible, either through the behavioral health funding streams, potentially CJC funding stream, but also for those who may qualify for Medicaid long-term care under the 1915K day services. And I got a maybe as a, as a response.
I don't know if anybody's coming.
I don't know if there's anybody who might.
I just know that when we were, after the conversation that we had, Commissioner Moyer, the preliminary research that we did is that it would require specific staffing that we currently are not staffed at. And I believe we didn't have to move location. And so I don't believe we could even keep it at the Mead if that were to be the case. So.
Okay. Okay.
So thank you, Denise. Oh, I know that it looked like and I think that I got a note from staff that it was because of the SARP that it was in the public safety because of that offset. So wanting to make sure we had DCJ here to talk about that. So one thing I just want to, so it is assuming like $5.3 million from the state of Oregon ask to help fund some of the,
Yes, it's changing the assumption that we would get state money for PSH and saying that we assume that revenue for shelter instead because the nature of state money is one time only.
okay, so the ask for PSH though in the state ask is it is the full 6.8 million. So that's where I was
Yes.
curious about swapping out,
Yep.
So
because there were other sources, I reduced the state ask, but I added some of the housing placement out of shelter into the state ask for the difference. So there's a different sheet that I have not shared that is so it still gets to the full state ask and it gets to your question earlier about making sure that it's the state wanting to fund across the continuum. And so it fits in that bucket of permanent housing placement.
Okay. So you've divided that money up and gone and then allocated or, and then identified reductions in existing budget pieces. But if we didn't do that and we just did basically just the swap from shelter to permanent supportive housing without funding that other piece, then we wouldn't have to take some of the reductions.
Correct.
Okay.
And it's just, and again, the dollar amounts that are the reduction were just what was slated for Y East and Market Street. So I know there's more in that shelter bucket. So I just want to acknowledge this is, yeah.
Okay. Okay, any other questions about 4 or 5?
Just to follow on. So if we don't get the state money, then what happens?
If we don't get the state money that would backfill this, then we wouldn't have the full amount to operate Market Street for, I think, the 7 months that the lease continues, and Y East as well. Unless we decide to use something else to backfill other one-time only.
And what, how many beds is that?
Shelter beds, I don't know.
Or
230?
I think we probably have somebody in this room who knows the
230.
answer to that question.
I got it.
230 beds.
And both of those at different times are already planned to go offline, is that correct?
Correct.
But essentially, it would mean on July 1, those would both be shut down?
Correct. Again, unless there's choices about other shelters or there may be shelters in the department's budget that aren't open yet. I don't want to speak to that. That would be something they would need to speak to is the timing of other things. But Y East, Market Street, I think was maybe 7 months into the fiscal year before it's slated to close.
So I don't know if staff's ready to answer that question, but I would, just before we get to the amendments, it'd be great to maybe get an answer next Monday or Tuesday, whichever time we have next, just to, because I think there's a likelihood that could happen. And I would want to know what the plans are.
We have folks coming down to help answer these questions. I know, right? We have a room full of experts. Yeah. And the music. Da-na-da, da-na-da. Okay.
Necklace, nothing.
Hello. Good afternoon.
For the record, I'm Stacy Bork from Deputy Chief Operating Officer. I use she and her pronouns. So I think with any planned or unplanned shelter closure, I think there'd need to be a ramp down. Generally takes 60 days probably to find other locations. And so I think the department would need to do some very early work once this board makes a decision. And we're not going to have probably clarity from the state by July 1st is my guess. And so we'll need to come up with an alternative strategy should those programs need to ramp down.
And that would be true of whatever we are budgeting for state dollars is like, if it were somewhere else in the budget, it would also, that thing would have to be planned.
So the
to ramp
the PSH that's currently contemplated in the state ask does not currently exist. It's new capacity, building out capacity. And the shelter beds that is in the state ask, at least for the county's portion, those are additional beds that would be coming online.
I just can't emphasize enough that I don't think we can call it PSH when it's a state ask. We can call it 2-year vouchers for people at most.
We did try to have the state ask be focused on things that were not currently open so that if we didn't get that, we wouldn't be causing, causing closures or things like that. So it was things that we made the hard decisions to cut in the budget, and we're looking to, as Stacy said, add capacity to the system if those dollars came through.
So just to sort of follow on, and these are more just thinking about what we've expressed to the broader community. So in the IGA, the community sheltering strategy was 1,000 beds by December 31st, 2025. And we're now down to 850.
872, but yes,
872.
something right there.
872. And if we didn't get the money, and even if we had to ramp down, we'd be down to 6 something.
Well, to be
So-
clear, we'll be down to that anyway, because these are places that are closing.
But not through the fiscal year. So it'd be 7 months earlier than, I'm not opposed, I'm just trying to make sure that we communicate, because I think if we told people we're going to have 1,000 beds from this IGA, and then it's ramping down. Antoinette, you're shaking your head. No, okay. I was like, okay, I want to make sure you, I always want to see you nodding. My thread is going the right way.
Same numbers, you know.
So we could be down to 600.
Yes. I mean, I think in the state ask and the chair's budget was trying to preserve beds and make as much progress on the community sheltering strategy as possible.
So we actually wouldn't be making any, we'd actually almost be back to status quo.
It would not be, there wouldn't be a significant net increase in shelter beds. I mean, that's.
So this is a more just sort of like how we work with the city is like, if we're to accept this amendment, we should definitely be having conversations with the city, like right now, so that it's not a surprise to them if we don't get the money, and then that we're backing, like the numbers shifting from what we all agreed to in the IGA. I know it's not everybody here, but it was like the people who were here that agreed to the IGA. I mean,
I think, Commissioner, we should be having that conversation anyway, because again, these being slated to close is not something we've talked about with the city. And for me, the way that it shows up is that using ongoing funding for something we know is not going to be ongoing. And that's why I think we should be talking to the city regardless of what happens with this amendment, because these 2 sites will close and we will be below we're going to be below the amount, but yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, this is, and only the chair and I were here at the end of the year when we were having, before the election, about like what was in the IGA and should both parties agree to it. And granted, there's only one party over the city now who is part of the other side, but it is actually an agreement between the two entities, whether people were here or not. And I just think what I want to avoid is these like last minute phone calls of like, you guys cut something out of this, or we didn't know you weren't going to. I mean, I still hear people talking about the county's going to hit the 1,000 bed, because we talked a lot about that, the 1,000 bed community sheltering strategy. So to Commissioner Singleton's point, I mean, I think we should, in writing, like, here's what's being contemplated or what's been proposed, because instead of like, hey, the vote happened yesterday, you're too late to have that conversation, like just lay it out so people can see it. So if they want to make adjustments, they can, because they may want to, but it shouldn't be a surprise and you didn't tell us and you committed in the IGA to do X.
And I will say, I definitely can do more outreach and we can do, but I have shared this amendment with the Housing and Homelessness chair as well as the mayor. And so they know these amendments are in our hopper.
And I will say, like, I have had conversations with the mayor and there have been staff level conversations with that office about when my budget was coming out, what was going to be funded and what was not. And again, I think the realization that we had an over $70 million hole to fill in the Homeless Services Department budget, like that one of the ways that we were, that I was trying to keep the entire system whole was to slow down the pace at which we were going to be opening beds for our community sheltering strategy.
I have a question. Looking at the money that we have passed through and the money that the city is currently contemplating, will we as a county drop in the number of shelter beds, or is it still going to be a net increase?
As the county as an organization or
No.
the entire
Physically.
So publicly funded sheltered beds.
Yeah.
I think that based on what the mayor's strategy is around overnight shelter beds, the expanded beds that the county is currently working on, there will be a net increase. They're not exactly the same flavor. They all look a little bit different. The outcome, the intention might be a little bit different, but overall, there will be a net increase in the number of places for people to spend the night.
Can you send that to us? And I just want to keep following on. Like, I'd like to see what's being communicated with the city, because, so for example, if I call the mayor and say, hey, you didn't put the 1.9 sobering services that you told us you were going to have in there, and the response is, it's like, well, you didn't do something, like the county didn't do something else. And it becomes a circular conversation. I just think this is about everybody being on the same page, and on the same page before the actual like day of the vote or the day after the vote, because then, you can't do anything about it. So it would just be good. So if there are a net increase, that would be also good to be able to speak to, but we need to, like, that chart that Anna put together when we had the community sheltering strategy, where they are, if they're different flavors, like what is it that we're funding?
And I think to a point you made several weeks ago, Commissioner, around the pass-through of the $15 million, like if Multnomah County had some of, or especially all of those dollars, we would absolutely be able to fund other parts, like for instance, the sheltering strategy or expanding PSH or something. So the pass-through and having those dollars at the city at that then is creating beds. You had said like, we should get credit for that. And I agree,
So this is why I just think,
yeah.
like, more transparency, the clearer we are, the better in advance, so that, because it as they move through their budget process for the next week and we do too, the frantic phone calls and everything are going to get escalated. So we should have everybody having the same information. So for example, if we're going to do that, then they can like decide on if they want to have an offset in a particular way, or we can say, you're getting the 15 million through the pass through. Like, our expectation is that's going to go to, whatever we think it's going to go to. So
Yeah. I think the other difference is that just because, and I think I have mentioned this before, but based on the timing, the request from the state isn't in my executive budget, like as terms of a source of revenue. So we can do a revenue amendment if we wanted to assume those dollars. It is assumed in the mayor's budget. So if we don't get that state asks, that is going to have an impact on what is being voted on over at the state side. So it's we haven't assumed that risk yet, but the city is.
Can I ask clarity so I make sure I'm understanding what you're saying?
Okay.
So your budget includes assumptions about what was in the governor's budget, but it does not currently have any of the joint $25 million ask. Is that correct?
That's absolutely right. So in every department across the county who receives state funding, we use the governor's recommended budget as the base because that is the figures that are available as departments are putting together their budgets. So that is assumed across the board. And then, but the additional ask that we made is not included in mine, is included in the mayor's. And so I said, like, so if we want to make assumptions or talk about like how we would actually allocate those dollars as a part of this budget process, we could do that through a revenue amendment.
Can I jump in? I would just point out that the mayor's overnight shelter beds were not contemplated in the IGA either. And so I think we're all having to adjust on the fly. And I appreciate, as somebody who was there, I appreciate the proposal that we adhere to the commitments we've made. But just to note, part of what's sucking money out of the system is things that were not contemplated in the IGA and have come online since then, including that $15 million from Metro. That said, there's no question that PSH should be funded with ongoing dollars. And I think the underlying intent of your amendment is spot on. I will echo what my colleague said. It's June, early June. It would be really chaotic for us to send a signal to hundreds of people and the providers working with them that their beds may be at risk in 3 weeks. And I know you know that, so I'd like us to work with the board and the chair and the COO to think of a different way, maybe to honor the transition you're trying to get with our budget so that going forward, we're not funding shelter with ongoing and PSH has to fend for itself. That's not the model we all intended to get, but I don't think doing it at the 11th hours, I think it's going to be chaotic.
Go ahead. I have a question, but.
just, I really appreciate those comments. And so if we're showing our work on like what may be different from the IGA and the community sheltering strategy, it would be great to ask the city to do the same so that we have, again, whether we like it or not, we're bound to the sort of the city on some of these strategies. And so being able to answer questions about what the combined piece is going to look like, which was the whole point about the IGA. So if they're doing something different and we're doing something different, it would really be helpful to like sync it up.
And I think that is part of the work plan of the homelessness response system this summer. And that's not going to, I hear you on your, the next few days. When I click back a little bit, that's the work that the HRS is going to do once the budgets pass and we understand what the city is going to land and what the county is going to land, and really coming back to the community sheltering strategy and homelessness response action plan 2.0. And that's certainly part of it.
But we know what we're going to do or are contemplating now. So at least let's get our piece in order.
I think my question is maybe to Antoinette. So I'm just thinking about this piece about, the correct thing that the state money really PSH is 2 years. Wondering about the flexibility we have in receiving state dollars to switch out, for instance, more ongoing funds for dollars that we would get from the state post-budget. So like once we have certainty over what we're getting to the state, could we do a budget modification to swap out the color of money at that point?
Thank you for the question. Antoinette Payne, she, her, Finance Manager Senior, Joint Office. It would depend on how flexible the state dollars are. If they're flexible, then it's an easy switch and we can bring forward the budget modification.
Okay. Thank you all for coming up here. It's really great.
If we want to pick this up Monday, obviously that's your discretion, but we can be prepared for additional discussion Monday. We might even be able to ask the state about flexibility. I think that would come from the agency, but glad to be available for more.
Okay, we're not planning to make anybody come to this room on Monday, so it will be Tuesday.
That was my mistake. But Tuesday, it would be helpful just to have that revision of like where we are right now, where we would be post Commissioner Singleton's amendment. And then if we also didn't get the state money, just again, vacation, and also with our city partners.
We'll make sure you have that updated. I mean, just to be clear, to a couple of you had questions about this. We're proposing to slow down the growth of shelter, not shrink the real number of shelter beds, but that's still impactful because it's a deviation from the strategy that we adopted.
To know what the net is and what the composition of those are.
Okay, thank you, Dan. Thank you, Antoinette. Thank you, Stacy. All right, any more conversation about that one? We have so many more to go through. So, I would say like for 16, I appreciate this as being on there. This is budget neutral. This is one that Commissioner Brim Edwards, did we do this one together? I don't remember, but this was just switching out to make sure that there could be data analyst capacity within, let's say, correct?
Right, so it's taking the existing FTE and having a portion of it be around data because currently there's no data analyst capacity. And from my experience to date, without data, then you're just relying on anecdote and maybe individuals' perspectives that aren't aligned around the same sets of information. And I'll say most of all the parties at the table, I think are in agreement that having data what we can agree upon, even if they have different perspectives, is really going to be important because then it helps drive your strategies.
Okay, great. I'm going to put a check mark next to this one. All right, so there's several around the legal services. And there's several around the DA's budget. Can we talk about legal services? Yes. Legal services looks like 18, 34, 18 and 34.
I have a Christian question. I may have misunderstood the chair's budget, or I may have mislabeled what I'm buying back in 18. On 25131A, was there a cut in 25131A? I'm not sure if my math is right, okay? I'm not trying to, this is meant to restore, not add anything, and I may have miscalculated which ones. I may have restored things that already got restored is my question.
I'm going to have to come back up here after we look it up because my computer is charging over there. And I'm also, if someone from DCHS is standing behind me, like,
Pearl.
I know the answer.
What was your pay for on this one?
This one is paid for by a reduction in materials and supplies.
Okay, this
And
was the
vacancies.
trim
Yes,
across the board.
this is the across the board trim.
We did not, there was not a reduction to 25131A. But this line here is referencing
also two different program offers, but has one number, because eviction prevention is not in that program offer number. So
Based on my descriptions, am I describing a different program? Is that D of 25131? Or am I describing A and it did not actually get cut?
I believe it's C. You have it twice. There's two different, and it's a little bit confusing because there's also a one-time only in court. Thanks. Sure. This is. Hello. Oh, hi. I'm Rachel. Well, welcome to my mind.
Okay.
Suggest you leave right away. Sorry, Rachel Pearl, she, her pronouns, Deputy Director for DCHS. Yeah, handing me other people's computers and yeah, I'm clear on, so I think what your intent, if I'm gonna, I'll enter your mind now, is that to fund the legal support
Yes.
for eviction prevention. And I think there's a variety of different ways that you all could consider doing that. I don't know if you wanted to add additional funding to the legal service day program offer, more so than there was last year. That's what the
That would
250 would do. But I think that there is the Project Reset, which was one time only, and then there's the eviction prevention legal support as well. And so I think it's just, and I think what we've said to you all before is just figuring out what the proportional amount for legal services is to the amount of rent assistance that's available. Because when we're, our partners are trying to avoid evictions for non-payment, they have to have rent assistance combined with that in order to do that. So I think it's just, figuring out what the amount that we feel makes the most sense in FY26 to contribute towards the legal.
Just a question. Most of these are contract services, aren't they?
Yeah.
So by its nature, they could be ongoing services, but they're actually like one-time payments. I mean, in the sense of, it's not like we've hired an employee. We have a contract.
With, for eviction prevention with Multnomah Public Defenders.
Are there ones here that are county employees?
No,
Okay, so it's contracted services. Yeah.
all of the legal services and youth and family services are contracted out. Yes. Not AI.
Can I offer that what we'll do over the next 2 days is show you how legal services were funded in fiscal year 2025, which things were funded one time only, which things were, then what the reductions were, because I have some in the budget director's message, but when things were funded with one time only and they kind of fell off the list, those wouldn't be captured here. And then also there were reductions in SHS funding in this area as well. I think bringing all of those pieces together for you to see, and then you all having a really strong conversation about which components you think you want to discuss going further in the budget.
So I think all that work has been done based on DCHS's presentation yesterday, right? Because there's, I brought up the slides. So if you look at slides 14 and 15 from the DCHS presentation yesterday about legal services, the first slide 14 talks about all of the things the legal services that are still funded, and that includes the 25131A. So that one is included on that list. But then the second slide has all of the things that were funded in FY25 that aren't included in FY26, and it has those there.
But we also have SHS, Homeless Services Department 30100, which is not administered by DCHS.
I think we'll try to get I think that's a really good start, Chair, and that was like a really good start to the conversation to help that you all had yesterday. but I think maybe just rounding it out just a little bit more, because I do appreciate the not wanting to fund something that is currently in the budget.
And I would just add, when I introduced my amendment, I think we can keep talking about it, but there wasn't a dollar amount attached to reduced M&S, and I was uncomfortable waiting for those dollar amounts. I wanted to make sure, because we had tried to get our amendments in at a certain time, and I wanted to make sure we had one that had some offsetting cuts, even though it doesn't fully fund.
So it would be useful to see what was the difference between what's not included in 34 that's in 18, because one's 2 points adds up to about 2.6 and the other's 1.6.
Yeah, I didn't have enough money to pay for everything, so I did some picking and choosing.
Yeah, so it'd be, I'd be curious what those were. So I would, just a general comment, and this is not about so I'd like to know what it is that's in each of the buckets. I mean, I think I can see what's in the Moyer-Dixon, Jones-Dixon, but what's not in 34. And I'll just say on 34, the offsets are the same that are used in other places, so just flagging that. And then there's also an offset that's reducing the neighborhood district attorney by one, the map. And I'll just say there's currently 4 of them. One of them is paid by the Gresham and Portland Police Bureaus. That's the one, I think, in East County. But there's also one in Hazelwood, one in Northeast, and one in Old Town. And I asked which one it would be, because I definitely do not. Hazelwood is one of the most impacted neighborhoods, and I know it's of value because it allows people to sort of clear their warrants, to remind them to show up at their court dates, and there's close coordination, and I would not support cutting, at least, so I don't know what's contemplated, but I wouldn't support cutting the Hazelwood.
So just like with any other elected official's office, I don't assume which positions they will choose to reduce. It is a dollar amount. That is what I was going after. So that is not something that I contemplate, because we, even though we're elected officials, don't get to tell other elected officials how to spend their money.
Yeah, I guess, but in some way, we said it's going to be one of those 3 positions by identifying it as that program. So it feels that way.
But it's not. I mean, I can appreciate that, but it's not. And it's very much I think during their presentation, you all heard me very clearly asking about what community engagement looks like. And it is not something that aligns with how my community wants to experience interactions with the DA. And additionally, I think there's some of the work that, and why I put it into legal services around expungements and things of that nature, is it's work that can be, is also done by our public defenders, that is at a cheaper rate with our public defenders with the DA. And as I spoke with you about when we discussed other amendments for the DA, I feel very strongly about the executive salaries in that office and how those decisions were made to fund that with the existing allocation.
Yeah, I'll say it does basically zero in on 3 positions, so it would be different if it were the DA's office in general. But I feel as it's picking one of the 3 is what that, I guess. So I would have an issue with, at least I know community members and neighborhoods and businesses in Hazelwood and East Portland value that coordination, and also the ability to have somebody out of, not in the courthouse, but actually in a neighborhood, so people can easily access the district attorney's office versus going downtown.
I do want to know all the math positions are in the same program offer. So, so that it could be a reduction to a program offer without specifying which position. Yeah, yeah. So I mean, that's,
Yeah.
Also, when we get to some of the other amendments, we should have an opportunity, Commissioner Singleton, for you to raise your issues about your concerns about the pay, because I think in the spirit of having that discussion, I've seen information that I'd be interested in your take on what your specific concerns are, to hear that and put that on the table.
Yeah, so the reality is we give the DA, we approve a budget dollar amount, and the DA can choose to spend that how they want. I know that there's a lot of work that goes into putting the program offers together, but they have much more flexibility than our departments do in how things get spent and when they have to come back to us. So my issue around the executive salaries in particular is that that was a choice, a decision that our district attorney made in a time where we knew we were going to have budget shortfall. And that is a decision that he gets to make, but it doesn't mean that I am going to be behind putting additional dollars into that department or into the DA's office when there were different choices that could have been made to fund some of the things that are now being said are vital needs. And that's really about it when it comes to, there's not much more I have to say about that.
Yeah, I mean, when I look at the data, many of the most senior positions are represented employees that the county.
I've clearly
talking
said,
about the-
I've clearly said his executive team, not the represented employees.
And I'd love to get sort of the download on which specific ones. When I look at it, there's from the past DA to the current DA, I don't see a significant change in practice. There's some ups, there's some downs. The previous DA made some pretty significant, changes in budget as well.
Sure. And I wasn't here to have that conversation with Mike, but I'm here now, and this is, you asked what I think. And
Okay, so just so I know, it's the segment that's not the negotiate, not the,
it's in the spreadsheet that they shared with us, it's the bucket that says executive team or executive salaries.
so there's one new FTE, I believe, and the rest are ups and downs or, okay.
And on average, there are 5% higher COLAs in that office than they are across the county.
Because everybody else got COLAs and merit increases?
The increases that have happened in that office are about 5% above increases that have happened across the county. And so it's, again, that higher level, and it may not be a conversation in a year where we weren't facing reductions, but it is very challenging for me to hear that there's this presumption that one-time only programs or things that are new offers are a cut because they're not getting funded, and to hear that they're a priority in a situation where if they were a priority, I would think you would have made different salary decisions.
Okay. I'm going to ask, I don't know if anybody from the DA's office is here, or if they're prepared. I don't know if you want to share.
No.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Adam Brown. I'm the Chief of Staff for the District Attorney. So I would be curious to know specifically which positions that you're concerned about. As Commissioner Brim Edwards noted, there is one new position in our budget. Otherwise, the district attorney's office follows general county practice with respect to giving employees a cost of living adjustment and a merit increase of up to 3%. So there's nothing in the district attorney's budget that deviates from standard accounting practice. In fact, with respect to our chief deputy district attorneys, those three are actually making less than the chief deputy DAs that preceded them in those roles. And so I think that the office has followed standard county practice for employee wages. There, as Commissioner Brim Edwards noted, our senior deputy district attorneys, those wages are determined by their collective bargaining agreement. And then from there, the salaries are generally situated based on the compression that you would see for attorneys that are supervising them. For example, the chief deputy DAs are supervising our level 4 senior deputy district attorneys, and the first assistant to the district attorney is supervising the chief deputy district attorney. So generally, it's following standard county practice for that hierarchical structure.
Thank you. I again feel compelled to say I have never referenced the represented employees and their salaries.
Thanks for coming down, Adam. Okay, so we have, appreciate that conversation. We have some restoration amendments for the DA's budget, and so we could start talking about those and the revenue that are used for some of those, if we want to have the conversation around that. So it looks like that is Amendment 15. Oh,
I'm going to start with,
sorry, 15, 25, 26. Those are all around that.
okay, I'm going to start with, just making sure what I'm starting with. An amendment that is a revision to something, to an earlier, and I'll withdraw the earlier amendments, but this is an amendment that I'm bringing forward with Commissioner Moyer that funds essentially 3 positions. The domestic violence, the treatment court, and the civil commitment. And as you'll see laid out there is the funding for that. And then the offset, and this is in addition to combining them, just so you can see the offset here, it's the opioid settlement, which we think is a good match with the treatment court and the civil commitment. The remaining comes from the offsets from my amendment that I'm not yet, that I introduced yesterday, but there was actually overpaid for the $200,000 for the animals after hours emergency care. So the money that's available from that, and then the $30,000 in the health department grant offset that the chief operating officer's budget analysis described as a possible cut.
Yeah, I'd like to talk about these and my thinking around this, which is, one, I am a huge proponent of treatment courts. I think that having off-ramps from jail is really in the public interest. It does require that individuals actively participate in their treatment plan. I acknowledge that this is does have impact on DCJ because some of the people who go through treatment court end up having a DCJ. It's not parole.
Probation officer.
It's probation. Okay. But one of the reasons to have this position, I do not know if this will increase the number of individuals who go into treatment court. I do think it will improve the outcomes to have a dedicated DA to this, because it really, in order to understand the specific needs of individuals, either through the mental health court or through drug court or our various versions of drug court, the more they are an expert, the more tailored the plan is, and the more they can engage with defense counsel to put together the right alternative to lead that individual into recovery, whatever that looks like, and not criminalities. On the civil commitment one, I will admit when I am wrong. And although I did initially oppose this because I thought it was going to lead to trying to civilly commit more people, and we fundamentally do not have any more beds in the community to do so, after hearing from Disability Rights Oregon about why they are supporting it, I have changed my position. And what they said, I think, really mattered to me, which is right now, we do not have a dedicated staff person who does civil commitments, and we are using law students who have no background in behavioral health, who have no idea what the trauma of involuntary care does to people, and don't really have the knowledge and expertise to negotiate alternatives. And so I really believe that having an individual who develops or has expertise can actually lead to better outcomes for individuals who are a danger to themselves or others due to mental illness. I also would just like to point out, civil commitment, although it sits in our DA's office, is a civil process. It is not a public safety issue. Nobody has done anything wrong. It is an emergency intervention for life-saving purposes. And then, I think domestic violence continues to plague our community like so many. And I just think it is really essential that we are able to provide victims the support and justice that they need to hopefully start anew and be safe. So that is why I am supportive of this amendment and support how we're funding it.
So I was a little confused over, is this a brand new amendment with brand new positions, or it sounded like you were rescinding something, or?
So originally I had, we had offered jointly the treatment court and the civil commitment, and paid for it with the opioid settlement. So this is adding in the domestic violence and having the complete payment package for it. And like I say, one of the things that may be a little bit confusing is part of the pay for is a refinement of amendment that when animal services were going first, it would have made sense, but you haven't yet seen it.
So it's replacing 15 and 31, for those who I see still looking.
Thank you.
Thank you, 15 and 31, because I don't think 31 got captured on here, so, okay, great.
And the previous pay for the domestic violence had been, just make sure I can. Sorry, I've got a couple amendments apparently. The previous pay for was one FTE from program offers 1,000 A, B, C, or 72,000. And so I'm replacing it with the ones in there, and I want to, I can do this at any point today, but just call out my appreciation that I didn't want, the other day when we had the presentation on the exercise that the COO's office did, that I didn't want to imply that that was not a useful exercise. So I hope it didn't leave that impression, because I think we asked for that exercise and I really appreciate it. And so in cases you'll see today, I try to utilize some of that, the things that were identified, not recommended, but identified as potential cuts. So you'll see that in some of my pay-fors. So thanks to staff who went through that exercise.
Yeah, I think my only thing is, I think we all use the revenue amendment, so that will be one we'll have to kind of figure out which are the policy priorities for those few little revenue amendments that came in.
Right. I will note for example, Commissioner Jones Dixon and Moyer have a different pay for the same services.
Which,
Yeah, I'm sorry.
legal services? Okay.
Because that was the legal. So the revenue amendments, I'm not using the revenue amendments. Well, the opioid one, yes. But I'm saying that the other two, the DV position, where I'd had something identified, I used some of the positions that were identified in the COO's one. And then what I was saying is, in addition, there's some places where there's different pay-fors where we've had duplicate uses of the same money. And you're right, we also still have some duplicate pay-fors.
All right, so can we talk about, they're all unpopular funding sources.
Yeah.
They're all, except for the new revenue. That's the new revenue. Mhm. Okay, can we talk about the Amendment 26, which is the Restoring Organized Retail and Auto Theft Task Force?
Yeah, I'm just going to also just pass just a packet of information out. This covers a number of the, just all the community safety ones that have been identified. And you're on the, which one did you identify, the body worn cameras?
Yeah, number 26.
Okay, so I have a slightly revised, and again, part of, I put down some amendments that, according to the amendment timeline that we had, but some of those I had as using vacant positions. Because the exercises was happening. And so when I'm coming back in, it's the same, suggesting paying for the same things, but a different pay for. So I still, on the body worn cameras, are still using revenue amendment number 4, which is what was described as the gun violence swap. I think it should be the gun violence reduction swap, but versus the gun violence swap. And then also a partial vacancy delay in hiring. And this is going to be something that it's going to be refined, but I briefly mentioned it yesterday. And I'm happy to circulate what I asked for from the budget office. So a very common cost management exercise within organizations, so frankly, some one-time money, is to delay filling vacancies. And I had an initial conversation with staff about how to do this in a way that is not disruptive. Certainly, there's some positions that likely need to be hired on July 1. Others that the plan isn't to hire till later anyway. And so what I hope to be coming back with is a refined recommendation on definitely not all. It wouldn't be, we're not going to fill any vacancies till October, but a selective delay. And again, some of those are going to be delays that would be happening anyway, because it doesn't appear that all the vacancies are going to be filled on July 1. So I'm going to come back to show my math, and also I want it to be informed by county staff in how to do that in a way that doesn't cause disruption, but does recognize that there are naturally some savings.
Can I ask for some follow-up information? Yeah. Or maybe not you. I have no idea.
I was going to be like, from who? Before I say yes.
Is it Christian? Is it Travis Brown? I don't know. The question I have is, again, I feel like I haven't been able to wrap my head around the reality of the vacancies, because you're totally right. You can intentionally stagger hiring, and then there's like, you could not possibly hire that many, especially if there's multiple positions within a time frame. I am very curious, if we were to look at the past 3 years, I am assuming we've had vacancies every year. I don't know how much, and it probably fluctuates, but like, how much is the natural amount of money that we end up not spending on salary and benefits because we funded a position the full year, but it's just not possible to hire everyone on day one? And then I am aware of some practices of which we kind of intentionally go to that same pot of money for anticipated future costs. I would also like to know like how much we need or anticipate needing, so that we can have this conversation about like how much room is there in that, and what do different proposals really put on the table, or did we already account for that in anticipated potential future labor costs? Does that make, I know that that's kind of a complicated question, but I feel like we keep dancing around vacancies, and it's really like, I feel paralyzed of like how I even feel about some of those proposed offsets, because I don't know what's real.
For the record, Travis Graves, Deputy Chief Operating Officer, he, him is. I think your vacancy questions are really good, and it's really interesting to see kind of the different ways that you're looking at them. I will say that kind of over time, the county's been relatively conservative about the way we manage this. We haven't managed on purpose, so I want to be really clear, right? So we haven't gone in and intentionally set the cost for positions lower than they really could be. We haven't intentionally tried to scoop up any vacancy savings that are there. And some of the reasons, because we know there are other things that come into play that we are able to fund because we're so conservative in that way. So for example, we know that generally speaking today our turnover is, say, 7%, right? So we could expect 450 vacancies any at one time, right? You can't exactly predict when that's going to be, right? You also can't predict where they're going to be. And that's the difficulty as well. So as I've thought through other ways to be able to like create a percentage, but you might create a percentage that you did less, that the health, well, let's use the sheriff's office. Sheriff's office has a good wave of changes, right? You may be off, and now you'll set a situation where one department is in the hole and one department might have something. The other thing that complicates it as well is you're talking across funds. So the vacancies aren't just in general fund, some are split between many different funds. And so you're really trying to figure out how to do that dance as well is really kind of difficult to figure out. The other thing around the way the county has chosen for a long time to manage this is the way we do it, and then it ends up with one-time only underspending that then you all get to use and do things like build the behavioral health center. Have your capital money that it takes a while, right, to come back into the system, but it also is the way, I think one of the things D3 was talking about, Commissioner Mem Edwards, was like payouts for vacation or that come at retirement, right? That is where we're able to be able to make sure that we do that as well, is have those funds. We've always been able to manage that way. And we do have a liability account for all of those to make sure that there's no question that we can afford that on the accounting side. But those are the things that then end up being, you're able to have capital money to be able to make decisions one time only, right? So you would shrink that ability to do that. I would also say the hard thing about not sharing, could totally share, predicting it's unpredictable. I think so, like during COVID, the carryover, the amount of hiring we did, the difficulties in hiring was very different than it was, say, pre-COVID, right? And so predicting that can be very, very difficult. But we're trying to kind of, in my mind, I'm kind of taking a step back, kind of going like, is there a way to do something like this? So I will say in response to the questions you guys have had, we're all doing math someplace else, not here, but just trying to say, is there some way to be able to figure out what that looks like? Commissioner Mem Edwards, you talked about, is there a way to slow hiring, right? And absolutely companies do that, right? Hey, we didn't take your headcount away, but we said you can't hire for 3 months, right? So that way we're able to build some one-time only money. I do think that is something you could consider. I say we, it's not me. You all could consider doing. And when I start thinking through it on like an individual basis, I think of things like, and I'm going to use some kind of top positions because we know about them. So Dan Field, our friend's retiring, and we've got Anna Plum's going to step in behind him. We know we need that position filled, right? So that will be a vacancy that we're going to want to continue to try to hire on, and it's filled. In other places, you have temporary and on-call workers that are actually on the ground doing the direct service, right? That are actually continuing with what's necessary to keep it going. There definitely are some vacancies, though, that are just vacant, right? So we're going to try to see if we can cull through to see what that looks like. And so the budget office is working probably as we speak to kind of look at that, that list of vacancies to see what's there. And you also get into things like in finance, there's separations of duties. And so if you don't have certain people in different positions, the machine stops and things like that. And so it looks very different and really different types. And because we are so varied, it's really kind of difficult to kind of give a specific answer unless you're kind of going deep and trying to look.
That's why I'm not laying down a specific proposal today, because I want it to be thoughtful. And I knew if I said 100% that you'd have 5 examples. You've named a couple today.
Right. Those are just off the top of my head.
Yeah. But I know that this is like having worked in a large organization, but I also am well aware is like managing your vacancies and hire dates are all best practices in terms of cost management and timing of revenue and everything else, and also taking into consideration the funding source. So, you know, when I first got here, I thought, like, look at all those vacancies in the sheriff's office. And it's like, well, actually, you don't get any money from those because it all goes to overtime. So I understand there's some complexities, and I will want it to be informed by, but I do think we can achieve some savings and not have it be disruptive to the county operations.
And that's definitely we're going to look at to see what that looks like, kind of what that order of magnitude could be, kind of from our best view of looking at some of the specific positions. And then that will definitely free up one-time only money then for you to be able to use today, but it will have a longer term effect for you where the money that we roll over through underspending that happens, that you have a new
CSO. I mean, you have a the following year, you have a full position, you're paying for the full year. So
yes, I mean, you absolutely will be able to fill the position. I just mean so often departments underspend, right? At the end of the year, part of that is this money, right? And so that cushion that we have will continue to shrink.
Yeah.
That's all.
Essentially, we'll have less OTO general fund next year.
In 2 years.
2 years. It takes a while to true up.
And that's actually a question I have for Jeff. Hi, Jeff. Is just how, like, how much assumption, if any, is there for the beginning working capital for FY '28 based on, the vacancies, or maybe not specifically for FY '28, but just from kind of year to year, based on the beginning working capital? Sorry, go ahead.
No, excuse me. Jeff Renfro from the Budget Office, he, him pronouns for the record. We assume that departments fully spend their budgets, and then we assume that I'm going to be exactly right on the forecast. So those are our two sources of one time only. Yeah. So right now we're not relying on any like one time only or BWC that would fund anything until we actually get there and calculate what it's going to be for the next budget process.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure we weren't like, by doing anything, we're going to be making the deficit bigger in the future, but that's not included at all in your forecast.
It's not included at all, but I do want to like just emphasize a point that Travis made where we have been able to use our one time only in very smart ways, specifically to avoid taking on additional debt. So a great example is the courthouse. We were able to put over $100 million of one-time only that we saved up over numerous years. That did save us ongoing expenditures. So there is indirectly an ongoing hit that we could take if we're not able to make those capital expenditures in the way that we have in the past.
We also, though, have the potential going forward to restore some funding that from the motor vehicle tax that is going to pay for the convention center. So we have some revenue streams coming online, and this is, I think about managing some of those overall. I'm always surprised how much the county pays, like pay as you go, versus having a longer term horizon on long-term capital assets. We could debate it all day. But we will have like there will be potentially a revenue stream which will be coming back.
I think very true.
Yeah, and I agree. And there are limits to those dollars. So I think what part of what we're doing right now is to figure out exactly what those dollars could be spent for. No. This is not. This is not. This is further out. Future. Future. Some of us may not even be here. So yeah. So it is. It is a future thing, but and I'm looking at Eric back there. You don't need to come down, but I know that he's working on trying to really answer the question and work with legal on like what can those dollars be used for? What could they possibly offset? So that's an ongoing conversation.
Anything else for me?
Yeah, it's back to the
Thanks, Chef.
open positions, because I don't know how I feel about, I mean, I think there is clearly savings just because of the nature of funding positions for a whole year, which I also understand why. I cannot predict collective bargaining. It is a two-way process, but in this instance, it's a 7 different parties process. I'm unaware of a collective bargaining agreement that ever reduced costs. Certainly that was never my goal when I bargained contracts. I always wanted them to cost a whole lot. So I fundamentally don't want to settle contracts to then come back and cut services. Or at least I want to do that intentionally, with my vote. I have heard that we don't set reserves aside for that. Some other governments do. They have wage and benefit reserves. That's not a practice of Multnomah County. That gives me heartache. I'm not gonna lie about that. But that we have some of these predictable, unpredictable savings. And I know that we can only ballpark where we think we might land, but I am very nervous to spend funds that we predictably put toward a somewhat predictable cost increase. There's no perfect art form. You can never guess that totally right. But I do not love the idea of like, we have not planned at all for that. Spend savings, and then we'll come back here and cut jobs or programs at a time in which we have to cut deeper to get that kind of savings. I don't know what level of clarity can be provided, but like, if Commissioner Perm Edwards put forward something that, yes, it would produce X amount of savings, but we already intentionally believe we have to use that to fund the potential contract, I feel like I'm actually voting to cut something later. I don't know if that makes sense, but I want to be able to look at these proposals and know what it does to us in a scenario where we need to fund a contract.
You're saying something I think that makes a lot of sense to me, right? So one of the things that happens because the way we manage our vacancies, right, is next year when everything settles, we would be able to look to say how much departments absorb within whatever's there, right? If we scoop any money out, right, that won't be there, right, to be able to be there. I think you're right on. It's one of the ways that we've been able to manage that. One of the great things we have with our great budget office, right, is they've already assumed the COLA, right? So we know we're already going there with the basic COLA. We know that they've already, like, especially like Local 88 and whatnot, we've managed our market adjustment bargaining and things like that. So we've pulled things out that could be really significant, and they are in many other contracts, right? Where we at least have a baseline. So those pieces have generally been thought through, right? And there. But you are right on that. What would happen in September if we settled our contracts and we were looking to say, what does this increase do? Oftentimes the budget office looks across the organization and is like, we're able to see the departments might be able to absorb this much within the allocation that they have based on whatever the spending looks like 4 months from then, right? As compared to if we do anything before that, that cushion probably wouldn't be there.
Oh, sorry, go ahead. I just wanted to do a time check. So we've got about 20 minutes left, and we haven't talked about MCAS or fees yet. So okay, so thank you so much, Travis. Very helpful, lots to consider. No easy decisions.
I do, just to wrap that piece, I do feel like it is hard to start making decisions about what I support or don't without knowing some of this detail. And I know it's a lot of work for staff, but it would be helpful to know when we are going to get that information and what the actual I know you've done some of that work in the big spreadsheet, but as some of these changes are happening and some just said vacant positions, but now they're getting more specific. So yeah, knowing when would be helpful because I'm feeling the crunch time.
So you're asking when the identification of some of these impacts of the vacant positions would be available?
And understanding where there's amendments that are referencing vacant positions of, does that impact what Commissioner Moyer was just talking about? And what are the dollar amounts of those would be really helpful to understand. It feels like there's still a lot of unknown to know how to vote on an amendment that includes vacant positions right now.
So I think there's a certain amount we could know. And again, because it's, at least this proposal, I can't speak to anything else, that it will be done in consultation with and informed by staff. But I also think we have to assume that the programs we had that were offered that survived a constrained budget were not just placeholders to be used for something else. So I think I would hope that's not the case. And that's why, the list, I think the list that we got was relatively short. I mean, of possible cuts, not recommended cuts, but possible ones. And again, this isn't going to be just across the board in any way or I mean, it's pretty standard, I'd say, usually is like, this is a Q2 hire. So Q1, you're doing your recruitment, you bring them, the start date is day one of Q2. And I've never seen it done across the board. I mean, because it's just not good practice, because a lot of times positions need to be filled. So
maybe mine is a question back to commissioners who have used it, like you've done some of this follow-up. If you've used vacant positions, it would be helpful to know at this point if those are part of what is being pulled from what the COO's office recommendations, because we did these amendments before we had that. And so they don't.
remember I asked for that yesterday a couple times. So yes, and I think the MCAS one I would put on the table, I was told that I was using something that had already been used. So I think I pulled two that weren't previously used. And I don't think anybody's previously used a delay in the vacancy.
Commissioner, it's certainly not just you. This is my point, is there's a lot of vacant positions listed in this big spreadsheet. And I think it's more than what's in the COO's recommendations. And so that reconciliation will be helpful to know which ones are real money now and which ones we need to either figure out other funding sources or do something else with.
Okay, so I'll only speak for myself, as we tried to go back this morning and take out ones that had already been identified by somebody else.
So maybe we can
Not
make
the
that-
revenue amendments, but the vacant positions.
So maybe we can make that ask of everyone who's put forward amendments that uses vacancies. Yeah, no, that's, I just wanted to make sure I'm understanding and everybody's hearing, right?
Yeah.
So can we come on Tuesday with, like, if you're using a vacancy, check to see
If it's in that.
if it's in that, or if it's something else.
Well, I also would say, just like the conversation that happened the other day of like, hey, I identified savings and want to use them for amendments, is, I was just say, I left vacancies because I wanted to respect the process that we asked for that. So mainly my process now was that I looked at what had been offered. So which is different from new positions, but the vacancies, to look at ones that hadn't already been proposed by somebody else that were on the COO's list. To be more specific, but I did start with a vacant position because I was told that it would be good to have.
So, okay, so public safety. So, and I just want to remind folks what we're trying to do is have a conversation, to like touch on every amendment that's been brought forward. And then next week, really focus more on like, where are we in the priorities on this amendment? How many people are supporting, But like right now, we just want to kind of touch on all of them. So we've had that conversation about that. So do you,
Are you saying we can't propose amendments that just say Chris will find it?
not, I think we're past that point. We had plenty of those. And also, yeah.
Now, maybe if we paid him a finder fee.
Yeah. But he would just like, the position is my finder's fee. I want to keep it. Okay, a MOPE. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, Commissioner?
Yeah, definitely. So what we are proposing is, I believe, $125,000 to support the MOPE program and pro-social events during the summer, spring, and winter times of the year. And the MOPE program, it's not just East or District 4, it expands all the way to, I believe it's 82nd, so a huge part of District 3 as well. And it would be managed, it would fund community-based organizations that are providing that program, and it would be managed through the city of Gresham, their team. And we are proposing pulling from the gun violence grant program offered 95, or the gun violence grant.
So just a question, Gresham may want to have 82nd on, but I'm curious, the portion that's in the city of Portland, would that be like co-managed by the city, or would it still be managed all by the city of Gresham?
It's currently would be managed by the city of Gresham.
But in consultation with the city of Portland, I'm just,
Yes.
I don't know
believe-
exactly how it works, so I'm just.
I need to get clarity on that. It's my understanding that they do currently work with the Office of Violence Prevention in the city of Portland. And so.
Great, I'd just love to know what the mechanics are, because I know it would be useful, just wanted to understand, without expanding the boundaries of greater Gresham.
Yes, yeah.
Also, I think the gun violence amendment, or revenue, which I had used for something else as well, you're just using a portion of it because this is only 125?
Correct,
I think
yes.
The other one's like 470, it's 475. Okay.
Correct, yes.
I'm sorry, where's the offsetting cut?
The offsetting cap is the gun violence.
No, it's not. There's $0 in there in the spreadsheet.
It's a new,
He just said it.
I just said it. I don't think it's on the spreadsheet.
Just said it.
Oh, gotcha.
have you laid that amendment down, though?
Yeah, I did yesterday.
You're on number 39, and on the spreadsheet, it doesn't have an offset, but what was just said was that number 3 on the blue table at the very top of the big spreadsheet, pulling money from that. Okay.
Yeah.
But the amendment you laid down yesterday didn't have the gun violence?
No, it did not have
Okay.
an offset.
Okay. I'm just putting my fingers on
No, I know I used every revenue amendment. I just don't remember where.
Okay. I was just like, I'm calling dibs.
Oh, we only used in the lobby.
And he only used a portion of it for this. Okay, interesting. Although I think it's been used by other folks too. Okay.
Yeah, and this would be, I will say that currently the MOPE program, the program expands to 82nd or Portland now for year-round programming. This would be specifically for like camps and things like that during the winter, during the spring breaks and summer breaks and winter breaks. They need additional resources there.
What age does MOPE target?
Youth. So between the ages of, it's elementary, middle school, high school.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you for that explanation and those questions. Should we move on to MCAS? We have a couple there. Number 17, restoring funding for animal services emergency aftercare hours. And then there's also a fee study budget note around MCAS. And Commissioner Brett-Majors, I would turn it over to you to discuss.
This is the printed version of what I sent everybody yesterday, and I laid down on, so you should have all had this in your inbox, and I think if it's not on the spreadsheet, it will be. But again, using the two of the offsets that were offered in the COO's budget analysis of possible cuts. And this is where you'll see this is a 200,000 for the restoration of the after hours. And this is the other thing that's, this is being brought forward by Commissioner Moyer and I, that the offsets are greater than the 200,000. And that's what's flowing into the other one I had. Does this make sense now? I offered an
What's
amendment.
the other one?
The other one I offered at the beginning, and it had that there was
Yeah.
60,000. So
Yeah.
this is a
I
flow
can't,
through.
I can't remember what that one was about.
It it was the domestic violence and
Oh, the
Treatment
DAs?
court, yeah.
Okay, okay. Something, okay.
so as a pay for. So we've talked about the amendment many times. I also think I just guess I want to emphasize that there was some concern that the utilization, there was no sort of cost containment element, like people could just go use the contractor pretty much whenever they needed it, and which is not a cost-effective necessarily way of doing it. And so this is very clearly contemplates MCAS actually being able to add some cost containment and some economies of scale, because it's not an insignificant amount for any, even a large provider of services. This is not an insignificant contract, and we should get some benefit from the size of it, but it also should be scoped. So that's also contemplated in this. It's not just this, you can take your foster animal in, which I think we should pay, or take a stray in and it'll just get whatever it needs and then build a county. So the second item I have is a budget note. It's an animal services fee study, and I mentioned this the other day. This is around, so my concern when I looked through the CBAC reports and also the budget, that there is a reduction in enrichment. This has also been a subject of the audits of when animals have a lack of enrichment, especially large animals who are in a shelter. Lack of enrichment also sometimes leads to, I'll just say as a parent with young children, a lack of enrichment in a small space. Behavior issues sometimes happens, and the concern then when you have behavior issues, it also leads to more animals potentially being euthanized. I was looking for a way to pay for this, and one of the things, instead of just increasing fees without any sort of analysis, is this budget note actually asks, of course, the chair to direct the Department of Community Services, of which MCAS is division of, to conduct an animal service fees assessment study work plan. And we had 2 dates in this earlier, but a work plan distributed by July 30th, and provide the recommendations back to us on September 30th. And it's my understanding that is a timeline that works for MCAS.
So doing the study, having the study completed by July 30th, and then having the recommendations by September 30th is?
It's the work plan that we'd have by the 30th, and then the actual recommendations by the 30th.
Okay.
I say, I had more aggressive dates earlier, and based on consultation with staff, are giving them more runway.
I had a question about your, the amendment, the substitute amendment. So is this substitute amendment still number 17 on the spreadsheet? Or is this an update to what's in 17?
We'll update or a substitute, and we are, this is my attempt to avoid some duplication, because I noticed I used the opioid settlement twice.
Twice, okay.
Which is just bad practice.
Okay, and then from a policy standpoint,
it's one thing for 2 commissioners to use the same revenue source, but like
the same commissioner.
A little bit of professional malpractice when I was like, wait, we used it twice. So it's a substitute. And again, this comes from the
so
the vacancy.
From a policy standpoint, though, I know there was a concern. There was concern about making sure, like, our fosters, the folks who are fostering the animals, still had access to the services. And then there was the whole, like, members of the public in general are just bringing in animals that aren't necessarily related to the shelter. So what is the policy that it's skinning up the policy so that it is taking care of the foster?
It's continuing the practice with our current practice of who has ability, but it's not specifying, as you may recall, the current contractor basically charges us full rate. And so it's contemplated to cover the same animals that we would have had covered in the past, but from a more economical standpoint.
And how do we realize those economic savings? By having a different provider provide the services? Is that?
Well, I'm just going to speak anecdotally, is that the current provider we have is very good and a full expensive.
Okay.
And I wanted to give MCAS, and I don't know if they're.
So Margie's online, so I would love to. Margie, are you available to, I know you're under the weather a bit.
I'm not seeing, let me just check the.
Margie's not online. But we have Britta.
There's Margie, it should be online now.
I mean, I'll just say it's my understanding that several times the county, because of the scale of what the size of the contract we had, tried to negotiate a reduction in rate, which is very standard. Sorry, very standard, but they did not agree to that.
They did not. Margie, hi.
I'm here. Can you see? Oh, there. You guys can hear me? I'm sorry. I am homesick, so I apologize. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear and see you. Thank you so much for making yourself available.
Excuse me, of course. So I appreciate what Commissioner Brim Edwards is trying to do here. And I think in many ways, she's trying to bring back, make sure that we have overnight services. To your question, Chair, from a policy standpoint, I don't know if my camera's working, but from a policy standpoint, if we just wanted to make sure that our foster volunteers had access to overnight care, we estimated that at about $50K. If we wanted to make sure there was overnight care for other animals, and this would be animals that particularly were brought in by our sheriff, police, other partners that work at night and brought in, this would allow us to do some of that work. I can't say prospectively whether we would be able to renegotiate a contract or get a new contractor. I think that's too speculative at this point, but we'd certainly try if that was part of the expectation with these funds.
Great. So it would cover the foster care that the kind of like historical costs of the foster care over
foster care,
and then plus some, but not all.
Some.
Okay.
Yeah, and we would have to work out what some tighter boundaries around that.
I would say 200,000 is better than zero.
Absolutely. Thank you. And we appreciate your work on this, Commissioner Brim Edwards.
I'd love to hear about the impact of the offset cuts, just because the way I'm reading the COO, I wish we had a different name for it because we keep invoking your name. And I'm reading this to say that they aren't recommending cuts to FTE. There's 30,000. I guess I'm just not clear on this. And then this is one I think particularly, Commissioner Moyer, you asked about some additional staff, and I don't know if we got the response to the questions about the new staff that were being added, which I know was just a couple days ago, but it feels like there's some unanswered questions on these dollars to know what the best offsetting cuts are.
Do we have a list of newly created positions? Which I know is quite difficult when.
Travis Graves is coming. I do believe that the newly created positions were part of the review that they did, but I want to.
Again, for the record, Travis Graves, Deputy COO. In the spreadsheet that we gave you all, we tried to delineate every time we knew it was a new position for fiscal year 26, so that should be in there.
Thank you.
That will be part of the review we're trying to look at in terms of vacancies too. And some of them could be already said, oh, we're using that for layoff, or we're using that for a project saved, or there's a, I don't know, but we'll go look at those.
Okay, is that helpful? So helpful. Okay. Did you want to hear from the departments about the potential impacts of these?
I do. It seems like there's a couple of options, and I have concerns about cuts to behavioral health and harm reduction. So I'd just like to hear more. There may be other options in some of these potential vacancies or possible new cuts.
Do we have, I thought I saw some folks from the health department. I see Justin coming down. So
So the ones in here.
I was going to say, somebody left me their giant Stanley. Wow. Wow. For the record, Justin Black. Yeah, there's not, these cuts are not without impact. I do want, and I think we tried to say that yesterday or whatever that day was. But so, like if you look at the, number 4 is the program specialists in behavioral health in the consumer engagement office. Yeah, I mean, that means less work being done in all of these departments. For the harm reduction, I believe it's, there will be less outreach on harm reduction. So there's definitely impact. These are not without impact. We were trying to find the least amount of impact in the unfunded vacancies, or sorry, the funded vacancies.
Thank you. Commissioner Moyer and Brim Edwards, I'd love to talk more with you about maybe shifting which of these positions are in there. It looks like we can still get to the dollar amount you're looking for with maybe some positions that have less direct service impact.
and feel free to talk to one of them.
I would be open to that. I mean, one of his, I don't know, executive specialists. So again, I tried to sort of follow the exercise of these were ones on the list on page 3 and 4 that hadn't been used elsewhere. And I think, like everybody else will acknowledge, there's, I'm hoping that we don't have positions in the county that those people aren't doing anything. So there will be an impact, but I also tried to, I think, follow the advice. It's like, this would be the ones that would have the least impact.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that's.
Yeah, and I think, Commissioner, what we also asked the departments to go through and prioritize all of these positions. So, that was, the departments went through each of these vacancies, laid out, what the position does, how long it's been vacant, and then went through and prioritized from their perspective where these are. So a large number of these are, from the department's perspective, the lowest priority in the vacancy list. I think as deputies, we try to go back through again and really kind of think through what the impact of the organization and the department would be and make sure that we weren't unfairly focusing on one area.
I think I used two of the 6 here, but I'm, Commissioner Singleton, if you had some others based on this.
Yeah, I mean, I think the BHD admin would be a preference for me over the harm reduction position.
So I'm already using, is that on the list, is that, which number is that? Because I think I already used number 5.
It's number 1.
Oh.
It's the same dollar amount.
Commissioner Moyer, do you care?
I always care.
I don't object.
Okay, I would just offer then just an amendment to switch that unless there's so we're just swapping out instead of number 2 on the COO's possible cuts list, swapping out number 2 for number 1.
Yeah. This is Valdez Bravo, Deputy Director at the Health Department. He, him, his. Yeah, our priority would be to retain the harm reduction position over the executive specialist.
Say you would prefer to have the.
Prefer to retain the harm reduction position over the executive specialist position.
Okay.
Thank you.
since Commissioner Moyer doesn't object, just for the record show, and unless, Christian, you need us to further give you a written amendment, we'll just be switching those two.
And then Christian, I'm going to make an ask if you could, as you're making your one spreadsheet to rule them all, to add the COO's identified, position cuts to the master spreadsheet, just so we can have visibility onto those too.
Yeah, so when I offered the amendments, again, from that spreadsheet, I tried to pick ones that were under the possible cuts, not the ones that had been passed over, and then to look what else had been offered previously and to avoid those. So hopefully I've now been successful. And then also to avoid ones that Commissioner Singleton doesn't want to have limited. Okay.
All right, thank you. Thanks to Health Department. Appreciate you all coming down. And Jess, thank you.
Is it possible to get a little bit more detail in those positions? I had a little bit of trouble figuring out exactly what those, where those were coming from.
Are you talking specifically to the ones that were on our list?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, on all of them, it would be helpful, like what program are they sitting in?
All right, so fees. But we're doing good. This is our last topic, and we have 24 minutes, so we might get out of it. I would love to hear from staff what we have on deck for Monday's conversation before we leave today, too, if somebody wants to chat me that.
I have a fee budget note if.
Okay, yes.
At some point.
So, and we have an amendment number 23. So budget note and number 3. Anything else that was missed in terms of fees?
I feel like I put an amendment forward related to transportation fees, but I'm not seeing it.
We have Jeff Renfro coming down from the audience.
And I could have not. I feel like I talked about it.
I know we talked about it.
But did I do it? I don't know.
For the record, Jeff Renfro from the budget office again. I think you put forward a budget note, and it was not an amendment. But if it was an amendment, we can incorporate it onto the sheet.
I feel like I wanted that. I acknowledged that they would prefer a process in which they got a year to do stakeholder input, and I appreciate that. But I wanted to put it on the table now.
Okay, we'll switch it up.
Thanks.
Okay, so you're going to switch it up. Gotcha. Okay, so let's discuss fees. So is you said you had a note?
A budget note.
Okay, is it related to the restaurant fees or just
It's
fees in
related to
general?
fees in general.
Okay, let's do it.
Should I just do it? Okay. Okay, this budget note requests the chair to direct Chief Operating Officer's office to conduct a comprehensive countywide fee assessment and by February 1, 2026, provide a report to the commission that considers impacts, payers, consistency across similar fees and recommendations on appropriate level of cost recovery. And just based on our budget discussion earlier about the cost of, like, say, copies for documents or the wildly varying rates of cost recovery, that it's clear that the county might benefit from a more consistent set of standards. So this is really intended to get at that, and hopefully it has a February 1 target date to inform the budget process. So integrated in anything into the budget process, and it doesn't mean that other like individual fees couldn't be increased or decreased, but that this would try to take that holistic view, so show up as one county.
Commissioner, if you're open to it, I'd like to talk to you because I had some budget note language around fees as well, and what I've been asking for around getting some consistency in any appeals process on the fees because it's different. So if you're open to that, maybe we can.
I am.
Okay, great. I'll follow up.
Because I think I'm now known for substitute amendments.
I have a legal question. I think this came up a little bit before, related to fees that are associated with data that we have a legal obligation to make public. I know we're allowed to charge the costs to ourselves. And the legal justification, if I understand that right, is that we can't create a barrier to the public outside of what is an actual cost to us to get publicly available information. Is there any precedent, case law related to differentiating in a fee between information that is for information purposes only, which, research, academics, news, someone's personal curiosity, versus a commercial use? Are we allowed to make that distinction?
Jenny Madcourt, County Attorney. I moved over, so I wasn't talking to the back of your head. You were trying to see me over here. So when we're talking about fees, there's any number of fees that the county may charge for either accessing services, accessing public records, or getting information. And it could be for permits and whatnot. So depending on the fees that we're talking about, we're going to have different answers. I think you were talking about access to public information in the context of a public records request. So Oregon law sets forward the framework on the appropriate level of fees that we can charge for obtaining records from the government. The specific question regarding commercial versus personal interest, the law doesn't make that distinction. The distinction that is made, however, is when individuals are requesting information for the public benefit, and you're going to think typically news organizations, then they can request a fee waiver. And then we go through the fee waiver process to determine if the waiver is appropriate and if it's a partial or a full waiver.
Thank you, Jenny. All right, so. Great.
On Amendment 23, is there, this is from Health Department vacancies. Is that still accurate for the offsetting costs?
And I don't remember which those vacancies were.
By accurate, what do you mean?
Is that a real dollar amount?
I think you listed the specific positions, didn't you, in your amendment? I seem to recall that.
I feel like I'm drowning in paper right now.
You are
drowning in paper. So this was 23. Yeah, the offset on the written out version of it just has vacancies in health department. I don't think it identified which ones.
That might need more detail.
Okay,
I'll be back.
so why don't we return to this one on Tuesday morning then?
I do have a question for the health department related to the specific fees that that I'm looking to reduce. I'm not sure if they can answer this. But I had some curiosity of what ability there was to shrink the universe of which we would only apply a 10% increase versus the 33, because there's a lot of fees that were subject to the 33%, and I was only interested, I'm focusing on food carts and restaurants, not the Whole Food Pod, not all the other ones. And then I was also curious, we charge a different fee based on the number of seats that are available. I did not see a differentiation for like franchise or anything else, but I would love to know if there were options to more tight, make this a smaller scale, because the intent was to try to address the needs of our small business owners, who, are not running huge chains, probably don't have 100+ seats, run food carts, not necessarily a business with 100 carts. So I'm looking to know what options might be available.
Christopher Neal, COO. I am not up here to answer that one because I'm sure you all can do that. I am up here to say thank you with the amendment, D3 on fees, et cetera. I also want to be clear too that none of this will be free. So if it's okay, I would like to come back after I can do a quick assessment on what that potential cost would be to do this fee schedule throughout the county as we continue to talk deeper into it. And if not, then we'll have the deputies, all three of them, work on that at the same time. Thank you.
Yeah, and I just want to make sure, I think one of the things I'm interested in from all the departments is like the time, and it sounds like a lot of conversations have already happened with like, DCS, for instance, but does that time work for, like in terms of workload and everything of getting it back, getting the fee study back at that time? So if you could come back with that, I would appreciate that.
Yes, Chair.
It can be part of the overall cost recovery. Because we're full. Commissioner Moyer, I did find your amendment, and you do list some very specific job codes for your HR. Just, I think this is the one you laid down at like the first day. Nope.
Are you talking about my
I'm
HR
sorry,
reduction?
You're right. These are the HR ones.
Yeah.
Okay. So back to restaurant fees. Hi. Well,
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner.
I don't think. Okay. Let's do restaurant. Okay, let's do one thing at a time. Let's talk about restaurant fees.
All right, happy to. Andrea Hamburg, her Environmental Health Services Director. Thank you for the question, Commissioner. Oregon state statutes govern how we can set fees for food establishments.
In my proposal, is that exclusively restaurants and food carts?
So we treat things as a category. In this case, food court code is one category, so we can change things between categories, but not within.
And is that due to state law?
That is due to state law.
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
I don't totally understand.
You can't, so because the fees cover like pools and saunas and everything else.
So
but you're
that's a
saying
different
you can't-
category. So food code, so restaurants, food carts, food cart pots, et cetera, are part of the food code. So the food code governs how we can set fees. So we can't differentiate within the food code.
Within the food code, but you could say the people who own pools.
We can differentiate
can-
between categories,
Or
yes.
saunas, and I forget all the other things. There's a lot of other things actually in there
Yes.
besides just the food category.
I think I'm picking up what you're putting down, that this says restaurant health inspection fees, and your point is it would have to be the whole category, so it would include food carts as well. And it sounds like you were trying to do something more specific, but maybe not.
Well, I was wondering if we could do something like keep the 33% for restaurants that have seating over, no, you have to, okay, so there's no way of shrinking the cost.
No.
So,
okay, bummer.
Okay, you can refresh my memory from last year. It was my understanding that we charge different amounts for if you have over X amount of seats. Okay, but isn't that what she's asking?
We can apply a different percentage increase within the food code category. So
Can we create new categories?
No.
So how did those get, so are those categories set? How did that base amount get set? Because it's more than, say, a large restaurant than a small restaurant. Somebody set the larger one at a higher amount. I forget, is it set on the number of seats?
It's set on the number.
So it's a formula, and so you
Yes.
can't change the.
The formula was set by the state.
Okay.
All right. Yeah, I think that's all the questions. Thank you guys for being here. Appreciate it. Very helpful. Okay. 3:20, we have someone who would like to go at 3:20 because of commitments, graduations. Any amendments? Oh, actually. So I'm going to ask Jenny, I almost said Jenny Madcore, but no, Jenny Smith to come down to just tee us up for what Monday is looking like. It looks like we're going to have a further conversation about fees. Tuesday, thank you. Nobody's coming here Monday.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Okay.
Hi, Chair and Commissioners. Jenny Smith, she, her pronouns, Chair's Chief of Staff. So your offices and ours have been working together to identify agenda items for these conversations. We have another meeting scheduled for Monday where we'll try to help plan the agendas for Tuesday and Wednesday. The bulk of the conversations that are untouched so far are around homelessness and outreach services. And so those are a lot of amendments that you haven't spoken about yet. So I haven't talked with my colleagues since this meeting began, but that would be my estimation that we would probably start there on Tuesday.
Okay, and then I'm looking at some of the other categories. Health. We've touched on some of those because health has been touched on amendments. Children and family, or kids, health.
Okay. And there's sort of a miscellaneous bucket.
Miscellaneous, okay, great. All right, thank you. Well, we'll leave it in your good hands on Monday to have those conversations at the staff level, and then we will come back on Tuesday morning for more deliberations in our last week.
You have one budget note.
Oh, all right, great. So we have.
This is in collaboration with DCJ and DCA. It's budget note, which will provide a plan for the board funding consideration in fiscal year 27 to support the technology upgrades and implementation of an application that connects youth in or out or transitioning out of custody for the juveniles or the juvenile justice system. The application will support improved participation for youth and families in treatment and wraparound service referrals, which will lead to mutual accountability. And DCA, and we expect DCA and DCJ will submit an implementation plan to the board by October 30th, 2025. So I'll pass it up.
Thank you, Commissioner. I will say I put in budget notes yesterday, but I'm going to rescind those because they needed to go through one more check. I really wanted to make that Wednesday deadline that I set to myself, and I messed up. So I'm going to rescind those, and then we'll be bringing those back next week. All right. Any other amendments or budget notes?
So just a question. This is just what you just dropped, Commissioner Jones-Dixon. It's a budget note that just like sets us up for exploring something for the FY27 budget.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. Great. All right. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for great work by the departments. It was super helpful having you here to answer these questions. Appreciate the time everybody's putting into this. That concludes today's budget work session. There being no further business, we are adjourned for the week.